Preface.
How does a language teacher become obsessed with the philosophy of science? The short answer in my case is that I have come to see a social value for it. I have been teaching languages for 13 years. I spent most of that time committed to applying what I naively thought was scientific knowledge coming from SLA research. Like many young idealist teachers, I kept pushing for scientific rigour in the institutions where I taught, but was met with indifference and at times even resistance. But, as it turns out, my first day in graduate school started to transform this internal, martyrish narrative. What happened? I travelled to a country 13,000 kilometres away from mine, where I met researchers who were trained in a different flavour of SLA. It is not that these researchers disagreed with what I thought to be some solid facts. Or, it wasn't only that. It was also that they were studying different things, through different methods and through different assumptions, that is, completely different starting points. Upon learning that what I took for solid knowledge was not seen as such in other communities, I knew I had to get to the bottom of that. I've heard some neuroscientists say we as humans tend to avoid uncertainty because it causes us to experience anxiety. I was certainly feeling conflicted at that point, and I tried to look for any kind of scientific consensus in the field that would put my mind at ease. I could not find such a consensus on any issue, not even in how the field should be called. At some point I thought, what are my incentives to engage in experimental research if people from most of the other academic bubbles would never find my work to be valid? What would be the supposed contribution in that context, and contribution for whom? But more importantly, what if my way of thinking about acquisition is indeed not valid? Who is to tell the difference? And what then have I been advocating for in the past decade? All those books, all that effort put into trying to understand L2 research. What went wrong? I now understand that what went wrong was I did not have enough training in epistemology to avoid simply trusting one single thought collective in SLA over others. It is not that I did not read about other thought collectives, mind you, but rather that when I did I was still drunk on my own preferred paradigm, so to speak. They seemed to be very wrong. Their work was probably not very relevant. Certainly their ideas ran contrary to my own experience learning foreign languages, and they would probably eventually be disproven. Or so I thought. While this dismissive attitude may very clearly seem misguided to you, Thomas Kuhn's historical inquiry into science revealed this is how science has typically worked. His explanation was far more sophisticated than mine, of course. For one thing, he didn't employ the term drunk on paradigm. He rather emphasized, scientists use the same words with different meanings and perceive the world in different ways. In a way, they lived in different worlds, indeed, which would make communication between thought collectives not only difficult, but nearly impossible. Since then, I have reread those other SLA authors while trying to remain sober. Now I am even in a sort of rehab with the philosophy of science as my therapy. The discipline of the philosophy of science examines how we can generate knowledge in valid ways, as well as how we can ethically use that knowledge in its diverse applications and for decision-making. I really struggle to think of anything more important than that. During this time, I was also receiving training on research methods. This took me on another journey of its own. Conducting interviews, coding data, and later gathering data from over 100 participants and running a factor analysis was all really fun. Yet, I also knew about the infamous replication crisis because I had heard about it in the news many times before, and I guess I was subconsciously looking for the ways in which these methods I was being trained on were fallible, and oh Lord, if you look for that, you will find it. I was particularly shocked with how unsettled theoretical statistics are. Some people call that the statistics wars. I think the problem is that statistics are taught to us not as a series of assumptions and decisions, which is what they are, but as an already discovered set of perfectly logical operations which are revealed to us in our training, and we are merely to try to understand and apply this knowledge. Reading about the philosophy of statistics enhanced my knowledge of the replication crisis, the weird sampling crisis, the open science movement, the systemic exclusion of minoritized researchers, and the problems of scandalous amounts of research misconduct in academia, all of which go completely unaddressed in research training books and courses. As I continued to read about these issues, I realised that once you are in the terrain of the philosophy of science, you cannot escape it. And so I embarked on a third journey after my discovery of works in ethics and values in science. For many people, hearing about values in science sparks some interesting reactions, such as, isn't science supposed to be perfectly objective? Isn't science supposed to be value-free? Aren't we being too postmodern if we talk about anything other than objectively measuring through good methodology? I thought the world would reveal itself to us through science, independently of who conducted science. I am sorry to disappoint, but it turns out untenable biases can run deep even in basic scientific vocabulary. I believe after reading Popper, Kuhn, Lakatos and Feyerabend, you should read Helen Longino. To me, her book Science as Social Knowledge is as much a historical referent as any book from the above-mentioned authors, and she has continued to substantiate and refine her social take on science in more recent works. My inquiry into values ultimately taught me that the idea that science can be value-free is not only naive and historically inaccurate, but also potentially damaging both for science and for society. Values of all kinds shape scopes, theories, methods, and facts. For instance, as SLA mostly studies learners from elite backgrounds, and receives attention and funding in its role as a tool to aid the Anglicization of the world, all the attention goes to education and teaching. It's almost like there isn't a world outside of classrooms. Meanwhile, other areas in need of scientific knowledge of the L2 acquisition process become systemically underappreciated, underfunded, and understaffed, such as language revitalization, language rights, and linguistic policy and planning. Linguistic policies, for example, shape entire societies, and they hold the power to maintain, strengthen, or outright destroy cultures. Informing them with solid psycholinguistic knowledge should be a moral imperative, but that cannot be done if we believe bilinguals only exist and are only made in classrooms. And if we only understand bilingualism as an individual process, excluding how it can arise or go away as a population-level process. I wish I could say it was the social awareness that led me to rethink SLA science-making and not the other way around, but regardless of how I got here, I now find tremendous purpose in pushing for more rigorous and equitable ways to generate knowledge of L2 acquisition, development and multilingualism, as well as ethical ways to apply such knowledge. This book is the result of such aspirations, and its focus is on that first part. I explore one possible path towards a rigorous and equitable generation of knowledge in SLA through the lens of social epistemology.